Alrighty, welcome everybody to another episode of Tree Action, the Human Forestry Podcast. My co-host Tony Tressalt and myself, Dwayne Sr, and we love talking to tree people about trees and how trees have impacted not only their career but their lives. And joining us today is longtime friend of Tony and I, and a longtime arborist out there in this industry, Andrew Hordyk from Smithville, Ontario, or near Smithville. So welcome, Andrew, to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. Awesome. Good to be here.
I think we'll just get right into it. I know that you're one of our loyal followers and have listened to a few of these. So a lot of our interviewees have never heard it or haven't had the luxury of listening to a few like you have. So I just want to get right into it and ask you when you think about your experience and your time with trees, where and how that began, and like what first pops into your mind as the beginning of that journey for you, of where trees became something of significance for you?
Oh, well, that's a long, deep question. And even though you know it's coming and you're anticipating it after listening to lots of these, it's amazing how things, you just don't know what you're going to say, and you just try to be present. But if I had to dial it back to a time where I had the most impact on trees, was I was walking with my dad. We go to the lake on Sundays between church and skip some rocks and do whatever. And I remember walking down this pathway, which is really kind of cool because we do work at this place now. It's a water treatment plant in Burlington. And it was right down the road from our house. And I was walking through the asphalt pathway between these trees, and there's these white pines, and my dad's rubbing his hand down the pines, and he says, just rub your hands down the pines and have a look here for a minute. And he's like, and you just touch the trees and you kind of look at it. And I just remember very vividly him saying, look how complex everything is that lives here and how it's all working together. And, how can you believe that there is no God? And I just every day going forward, that I've been in the trees, I remember that moment. Quite often when I teach with you, I've talked about it. But that would probably be the very first time that as far back as I can remember, a time with trees and connecting me to trees. And that was long before I started Arborwood or got into tree work. I was probably maybe 10 at the time.
Wow. And so do you think that, either consciously or subconsciously or energetically that played a part in where your career ended up going?
All kinds of things impacted my life in the trees, from living in the city, growing up in the city, but always going to the forests close by to home, biking, dirt, like BMX biking and making jumps in the creeks and fishing the creeks, camping with the family, all the things related to trees, plus working in landscaping. And it just sort of evolved into me being an arborist, and everything aligned.
So as far as your journey actually into the trees, was there a point in time where you identified that the trees were like the thing for you, like whether it be climbing or working in trees? Was there a pivotal event or experience that you remember?
I was in school for business at Sheridan College, and I was working for a landscape company called Gelderman Landscaping at the time, which is also now one of my clients. It's all kind of really neat. But there was, I remember I was doing the weed whacking at a condo site there, and there was this big dead elm across the fence on another adjoining property. And this guy comes in and he whips out his harness, and he's kind of a cool cat. He's like, "Hey man, how's it going?" And we're like, "Yeah, good. And I just stood back in awe. And I remember watching him climb and dismantle this tree with ropes. And something I know, like I was working at Gelderman's and cutting trees and pines with no saddle, no harnesses, just dropping stuff, climbing halfway up, cutting them in half and all that kind of stuff. And this guy just blew the doors off, man. His name was Bruce Hartnett. Many people know Bruce to this day. He's owner of Champion Tree Care. He's a legend in Ontario. He's, one of the first people that have won the Ontario Tree Climbing Championship. And I just thought that is a freaking awesome job. And at the same time, my best friend Scott Hutton was moving to Alberta to work for Arbor Care. And I said, can you give Jim a call and see if he needs more people? And he did. And Jim hired me over the phone, and we got in an old Toyota shortly after that, probably a few months after that, and drove across the country and started at Arbor Care.
And so you made the decision watching Bruce take an elm apart that, hey, this might be cool. A friend's going to Calgary and you hitch a ride. So what happens when you get to Calgary?
Well, the intention for me was to go Calgary and then Vancouver, BC, and then possibly to Australia. It was kind of in my sort of horizon. And I got the brakes put on in Calgary. It was a fun place. I met lots of really cool people. And there's something about Alberta, as you know, for me, that's, I just love it. But I had, I don't know, wasn't long, man. Like I would say 3 months of climbing there, and suddenly I'm a crew lead, and, I'm busting fences and baseball cap on backwards and Wrangler jeans and just letting her buck. So, and I think the cool part about trees back then, 30 years ago, was not very many people did it. And I wasn't really like a big sports fanatic in school. Like I didn't play hockey. I didn't do all those things. And this was sort of like an athletic avenue or an athletic kind of thing that I could do. And I felt I was really good at, that, made me feel kind of special and made me feel kind of unique. And it was really awesome. And I think that's where coming back to Ontario for visits or coming back to see family and pictures, and I mean, my physique was getting I was getting ripped, all of it combined. It was just awesome. I felt free. I felt like I went places that nobody else had been before.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember I was at the, I wasn't in university. I wasn't wrestling anymore. And I'd always been very active in all different types of sports. And when the tree climbing thing started happening for me, and then when the competition first was introduced to me, it was, I think, 89, I think, was my first competition, or 88. And I remember thinking, man, this is, because I just tied it back to wrestling tournaments or football games, right? And I thought, this is another, maybe I can win at this, and because I had won at other things. And man, was I ever schooled at my first competition? I mean, I got my line stuck in the work climb, and everyone left me out in the cold in Winnipeg, and I was literally by myself, and I resorted to free climbing like I would have in the first place had no one been watching. But I relate to that sports aspect of it, which I never, you and I have never talked about that before. It's very interesting.
Well, I mean, I played soccer, but I played 13 years of soccer, which was great, and it's okay, but it was not the same as the accomplishments and the gratification I got from climbing trees was just unbelievable.
And if I remember correctly, I think your first competition was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it was in Weyburn. I figured we'd probably end up there at some point. So I was working with a guy named Chris Patterson, who also a legend of the Prairie chapter. Yeah. Still, every once in a while, we connect a little bit, and it's like yesterday. Just an amazing guy who came onto the crew, and we had to do a competition at Arbor Care to win a chance to go to the tree climbing championship, because Jim wasn't going to let everybody go. And I remember beating Mark Smith and Chris. Anyway, no, Chris wasn't there at the time. And I remember we went to the bar beforehand, and a very good way to take out your opponent is to buy them drinks all night long. So that was part of the initiation, I guess, into the competitions that I got, and thought, I can handle this. However, that did not go as planned.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it didn't deter you from continuing on in that
No, I competed all the way till 2014, and simply just because you always learn little tricks. It's great camaraderie. I had fun. I mean, my last competition, I think I won aerial rescue, and that was for me, that was a huge accomplishment because aerial rescue is so subjective. There were so many things like you could do right or wrong, or you incorporate something, suddenly a timeout, and year after year, it's like you get one chance kick at the can, and then to win it when you're like still, you're an old guy is pretty cool.
It is.
But overall, the experience of the tree climbing championships was amazing. I mean, as you know, it led all the way to the internationals.
Right. So. Well, and then often that comes up with a lot of the people that we have on the show. And, I know Tony often, I don't want to take his words, but, Tony often says that there's a direct line from the tree climbing competitions almost to his current position as a freelance instructor. Is that fair to say, Tony? Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you can really literally draw a straight line right through the climbing competitions, the people I met there, just the connections I made to. Yeah, it is the one thread that runs through just about everything in my career.
Right. Yeah. And Andrew, you're I'm trying to remember how I think I was already involved on the international level before you were, but how exactly did you get involved with the international? I can't remember. Did I throw you into it somehow, or did I don't remember?
Yeah. So, it was 2001 Milwaukee. And I remember meeting Rich Kenyon, a bunch of guys from Aussie, meeting Bettis under a tree, sat with Bettis, which is a whole other story on changing your career path. And then watching Wendell Lee in the Masters, like just so gracefully make that swing. And I thought, holy crap, if they can do this, I can do this. And then I think it was, we were doing a demo there, which was like I won't quote the title of it, the nickname we gave, but it was somewhat of we had challenges.
Yeah.
And that's where I met Ken and Rip and you and Norm. Well, I didn't meet you. You and I were doing some demo stuff there together, and Norm was there and other things. And I remember Todd Kramer and Mark Chisholm in the crowd, and we're all, pucker factor sets in because there's these guys that are sort of, they have some little bit of notoriety in the industry. And anyways, and then we went to a climbers meeting, and then I met up with you and Ken at the bar, and suddenly next year it's like, hey, why don't you come on and work in the events, right? So I was volunteering, and I was really blessed to get put in as a work climb judge right off the hop.
Yeah.
Which in turn, turned into, I remember Lita coming and Tom Greenwood's wife coming to me over the years and saying, your score sheets are used every single time. And that's just a testament how consistent you score and how fairly you score. And then eventually I became head judge of the work climb.
Yeah.
And I think you were head judge of the rescue at that time.
Right.
Same time. But we were kind of, we had our own little competition.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Caused its own kerfuffle of things, but everybody's got all kinds of things to say. And then I was asked to come alongside Bruce as head judge of the event, and he was chair. And I think you moved up to head tech, didn't you? Or was that later?
Somewhere in there, I did eventually move up to that. Yeah. I don't know exactly.
Yeah. And then Bruce got a little sick. We didn't know at the time that was where the issue was, but it was Bruce was sick at the time, and we had no idea. Yeah. And then they had asked me to step in for him, Scott would moved into chair, and then they had asked me to move into chair. And it was amazing, like what a journey of 16 years, and what a blessing to travel the world with your family, your friends, your tribe, and learn so much. I mean, a lot of Arborwood's success and a lot of Arborwood's professionalism stems back to what I would say would be Arbor Master and Arbor Master Canada, and back in the day, meeting yourself and helping me get through that mindset of what a business should look like in this industry. But also, a huge part of it was the tree climbing championships and the people we met. Like, take it back to that comment about Bettis and, who am I, right? And sitting at the bottom of a tree with Bettis and just thinking, holy crap. And, he's just a normal guy who loves trees. And I gave him a business card, and he's like, he looks at the business card, he looks at me, he looks at the business card, he looks up at the trees, and he's like, why do you advertise removals first? He says, you should be focusing on pruning, tree care, and do removals last, like, the way it should be. And the little switch goes off about your mindset, because even now it's all going back to like all the social medias about crane trucks and grapple trucks and Merlots and tree removal, and those are all the biggest hits, on all the buzz in the social media. But the reality is like, where's all the cool stuff about tree care? I guess it's just not as exciting, but really that's where your focus should be as an arborist, is saving trees and taking care of trees and taking care of tree people.
Yeah, I always, I remember when I first started instructing at the college, and it was something I would always, I'd have businesses asking me, who's the best student, who's got the best marks, basically. And, I'd often say, or I came to realize that it wasn't always the person that knew the most that would be the best, either the best employee or the best arborist, because I realized I could never teach people to care or to love what they do. You can do very good marks and do very good at school and pass tests, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you love it. And the people that love what they do, those are the ones that really want to care for the trees. And we need all types, and I don't want to alienate anybody or single anyone out. But we were just talking about this in the podcast before this, about what makes some people so passionate about what they do, and when for some people it's just a job. And I think it really is about finding your passion, really. And if you're passionate about removal, then that's what you do. But sometimes I think glamour is part of it. The big wood, big problems, big wood, big excitement.
Well, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's where your heart is too, and how your attitude and the value you bring to people, and if inspiring. Yeah, I don't know what the last podcast was I listened to. I think her name was Jeanette or something. Jeanette
Merrick. Yeah.
Was
it?
Yeah,
Jeanette.
Merrick. I don't know her at all, but the fact that she had worked for Frank and Pete, and she brought up, Steve Draper, who is a long old friend who just was such a great arborist. And just a great guy. He had so much passion in it too. But what I was getting at with her was, what struck me in her podcast was how she went from back then, and the ripple of you talking to her, teaching her, and suddenly she's into her own business in Kelowna, all the way through the ranks of Bartlett. Right? Her career, you can just tell that she's a passionate person who loves trees. Spent time as a kid walking through the woods, and I think those kind of people, I don't care what marks you get in school. You want to find people that really want to do this and want to be a part of this industry and understand the connectivity between the people that are all involved in it too. Like, it's worldwide. It's a worldwide tribe.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you mentioned, and I distract myself, or I get lost down my own rabbit trails often. And what I was also wanting to say earlier was that people, you care for trees and the people that as much as the trees. Like, and what I meant when I would talk to students about that is, like, you have to meld. It's a real art, I guess would be the term I would use, where you blend what's best for the tree with what's best for the client. And it wasn't just, no, I'm not doing that to your tree because, and you got to draw a line for certain things. I understand. Like, well, if you really want them topped, I guess I'll top them. Well, sometimes you got to make a stand, but you try first to educate and explain why, and that's about caring for the customer. Caring for the persons that own the trees.
Yeah.
Their
relationships with other people, their neighbors, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, like I said earlier, it's being an arborist is about taking care of trees, but it's also taking care of tree people.
Yeah.
I've often been accused of being too philosophical, whether it be by certain people in other areas of this world. But, you know, I always start my pruning talks, and it ties in, I guess, to your human forest podcast, that people in the spiritual form are like trees in the physical form. We don't necessarily heal. We seal over old wounds. We are who we are because of the environment we're in and the people that we surround ourselves with. Yeah. And we can compartmentalize those things too, to allow us to kind of, you know, go to places that we want to be and stay away from places that we don't want to be. So you learn from them too.
Yep. Yeah, it's part of the journey for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so, you know, along those lines, and you know, well, I guess just before we go there, like those, like you mentioned the talk with Bettis and how he said you should have pruning first. Like, how do you take experiences like that and implement it? Like, how is there? Can you share with us how you affect change in your business or your personal life based on that type of feedback? Where I can't remember the term you used, but it somehow resonates with you. And then how do you go about acting on that and implementing it as a change in your life?
Well, that particular incident was immediate. I mean, all my business cards went in a fire, and I bought new business cards. We're celebrating our 25-year anniversary this year. So I've been reflecting on change and where the changes happened and how the industry perceived us or people. And I would say it's a constant evolution of business. You don't necessarily know everything in the beginning. You have different things that get in the way, like ego and pride. But people, you get schooled, in quotation marks, by experiences, and you get educated by people alongside those experiences, and then the two together, you just take what resonates with you. And for me, it was always about creating a place that people wanted to be. And, you know, I like the party. I like who's coming with on the party. I like to be, you know, I just like to have a good time. And I think for employees too. So how do I take, I mean, you know, it depends. It's all incremental stuff. Like you had a huge impact on Arborwood and myself as a whole, from when I started training with you guys to working all the way till 2009, where we did a whole rebrand and train the trainer. That was a big year. 2008, 2009 were big years. You know, Tony was there and just amazing.
Right.
It's hard to answer that question. There's just so much that, you know, but if I find something that really works for me and it feels good, and it feels like that my customers are going to benefit from it, my employees are going to benefit from it, I'm going to benefit from it, then I'm going to go with it.
Right.
You know, when I see a reaction on somebody about a new device, I do hesitate, because everybody likes new stuff all the time. But if it's a process or a system that's going to make business easier and it's going to make us more money at the same time, where we can pay more or provide a better atmosphere for the employees to be, then that's what we'll do. We'll follow it. We'll pursue it. Does that answer your question? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah. Well, how? That's yes, absolutely. Thank you. The changes. You know, people we talked earlier about your competition and stuff. Do you remember your first climbing system, apparatus, configuration, whatever you want to call it?
Yes, sir, I do. It was none.
Okay.
It was like freehand. Give me I think there's a piece of rope on the truck to pull that chainsaw up here and cut the top of this tree out, and then we can flop the peg into the parking lot with the other branches on it, no problem. And then I seen Bruce Hartnett and got introduced to Arbor Care, and it was funny now, like Jim calls us up and he's like, "Hey, can you go to UFS and Universal Field Supply in Toronto, in Mississauga, I think it is," because he was a Toronto boy, Jim Fisher, who owned Arbor
The
Carries
founder and starter of Arbor Carry.
Yeah, we've reconnected again the last years. It's awesome. But I remember him asking specifically for this large eye beaner screw gate, aluminum screw gate beaner with an eye, right? Like a fixed eye on it. Because that was like the shit. Like everybody had to have it, and you could tie your anchor bend or whatever on it backwards, and it didn't have to fall on the spine or any of that stuff. And it was a screw gate, so that's what we started on. So I'm like, I'm buying one for me too. If the boss wants one, then I want one. And Scott's like, yeah, well, I want one. So, and then I got thrown. And I think I entered the industry like just after Manila Rope sort of exited.
Oh, yeah.
And, I got to climb on what was a 16-strand orange and white line. I had it for a long time, and I tied that hook on there. And I don't think I untied that hook for probably the first 6 months.
Right.
And it was, I think it was tied on with an anchor bend. I can't remember, but I did climb on a tie line hitch.
Okay.
And I was relative, it would always roll out on me, and like I'd like not roll out all the way, but it would roll and you readjust, roll and readjust. And remember Mark Smith at the time, he's like, well, just throw another wrap up top. So I threw another wrap up top, and that sort of helped. And then the figure eight would stop it from rolling out, but you just got used to putting the figure eight between your two knuckles and run the thing a little further reach. That's
yeah.
I think the thing that floors me to this day was with the cable core lanyard on a leather Buckingham saddle. I was privileged to have independent leg straps, unlike many people that had the butt strap that worked there. And I got this harness from Jim. It was awesome. Felt good. But was the Munter hitch on a cable core lanyard, and thinking about that, like trying to teach the staff today on new lanyard systems, or talking about them within our, where to attach, attach the inside D's, outside D's. Now do you attach, how do you do this and that? And good thing we have Mark Odette, who's been an awesome bank of knowledge there. But like a Munter hitch, you think about that, like do you remember that?
Well, I remember mine was a sheet bend. Like I remember, it would hang over the D-ring. You would hang the hook.
Yeah.
You would hang your snap forward, and then you would run the snap behind the other side of the lanyard up, and then through the D-ring. Like the snap would go through the D-ring.
Yeah, it was basically an overhand knot on the D-ring, and that's when you put weight in it. That's what held you.
Yeah, and then you could manipulate the tail to lengthen it and to shorten it. It was adjustable, not not extremely conveniently, but nevertheless, at least it did adjust. And
but we got good.
Oh yeah, you could adjust it pretty slick, Willie. And the end of it was never secured to anything. It was long enough that it would just kind of had enough weight. It would just stick out the back. Like I never ever thought about coming off the end of it or anything like that. But and it was used primarily if I needed to stop on the way up, or if I had to cut a bigger than normal branch, which that could mean anything from 3 to 6 inches, like on the way up into tying in, then I would put a lanyard on. But I didn't really even use it that much when I would work or prune a tree to position myself. Very rarely would I do that. I would just stay on my climbing line. But then I would use it for removal, right? So when I was doing removal, that's where it was really employed. Never did use a climbing line for removal.
Like, I don't know about you, but in a removal, I didn't use my climbing system. It was hanging off my belt, but it was there just in case, or to pull something up like a chainsaw, or bring it back down, or a rigging line. But never like cut and toss one lanyard. And I got pictures of me. I was looking at them the other day. No hard hat, baseball cap on backwards, I had earmuffs. That was pretty cool. And safety glasses, but I like Wrangler jeans, and I don't know if you remember the Wrangler jeans with the little fray marks all the way around my leg, but I had a chain come off and wrap around my leg of a Sash Domar 143 Mark's through the chain in a I think I was bucking and it wrapped around my leg, and I thought it was cool to like go through the washing machine and all those little spots frayed,
Yeah.
like all teeth marks, they just cut in enough to make it fray, so it looked cool. Yeah, that was it. Like, it's not,
Yeah.
just
It was the same for me. There was no. The lanyard was it was used for removals only. I didn't ever use my climbing system, and
no, one hand and a chainsaw, like you're way out on your system and you're getting to places like, people are taking pictures and you're I remember that, like the 020,
yeah,
frick, the aluminum body chainsaw was brap.
yeah.
Like, what an awesome device. I wish I could have one of those right
I
now.
still have one. But I remember also using a big handsaw, a Tuttle tooth handsaw, in a big scabbard, like it was a long one, and I have pictures of me dismantling a poplar with a bandana and T-shirts with the sleeves ripped off and a red
Well, I never
bandana.
used the big long saw, but I know that you use that in the competitions because like my height, your height made it a fair advantage that way that you could get to the bell.
I don't remember if I used it in the comp or not, but maybe I did.
I'm surprised you didn't use it on footlock to give you that extra reach. I remember on my first footlock, it was 17 and a half seconds. I was on top of the world. Chris Patterson and I trained for that. And it was like,
But what you think back to the beginnings and what we did and so on, and you think to it now, like how would you describe the progression and the changes and what it's meant for the industry or how it's impacted the industry and how can you, like, as you view the timeline of events, what catalyst of the change, what pivotal points do you recognize in the career of arboriculture that's brought it to where we would say it is today and it's still moving?
I would say that, first of all, I was super grateful to be in the ITCC along the sides of some of the great people that climb and great techs and great judges who brought all kinds of really cool devices, ideas to collectively together, which I think really started the arboricultural evolution. It was pretty slow going, like everything in today's day and age. It was slow going up to that point, and all of a sudden, 20 years ago, things start to compound a little bit, and then 15, it's happening faster, and 10, it's happening faster. But I would say in the last 10 to 15 years is when it really started, and in the last 5 to 10 years is when it's really propelled and escalated. And the things that started all that, I feel really honored to have been a part of the growth, I would say, alongside of many people, not just me, like of the rope wrench and the rope runner. And I know there was hard stumbling blocks along the way with a lot of people in the industry, and I don't hold it against them because we are all emotional beings. But sticking our ground on that device, and even in Arborwood, ITCC, it wasn't about having control. It wasn't about fear. It was about respecting safety and respecting what was right and what kind of an impression we're going to give or what kind of ripple we're going to send through the industry. And Kevin and Bingham and I have talked about this to this day. I still hold him in high regard for one of the most innovative people in the industry. I absolutely love him. And I remember him showing up to it was Rip, I think yourself, myself, Scott Profit, and I'm not sure if Mark Bridge, I'm pretty sure Mark Bridge was there.
He was.
And I got this new device. I'm wondering if I can try it in the work climb tomorrow. And we're kind of like,
It was in Chicago.
yeah. And it was like the most primitive form of the rope wrench. What was that, 2007 or 2010? Anyways, doesn't matter. And we debriefed on it, and we thought, we went on the pros and cons, sort of a mini SWOT analysis, for lack of better words. And we came back and we said, yes, we'll let you try it under, this supervision, but then we need to kind of figure out how we're going to deal with it. And he frickin' didn't show up on time for roll call.
Yep.
And we had to DQ him.
Yep.
And we had to DQ him, and he was pissed. And, and rightfully so. I mean, I would have been too. You fly all the way in. I mean, Milwaukee to where he lives, Detroit to Chicago's not that far. So it's not like you flew across the world. But still, I mean, it's your one shot, your one chance, your one opportunity to get in there. And it was a bummer to have to do that. But, the tighter the rules, the higher the performance, right? And anyways, so he went back to the drawing board and it went up and did its thing. And yeah, there's been lots of bumpy things along the way, but he ended up coming back with a device that worked. And then the rope runner. Those two things alone, I think, have mentality in the industry.
Definitely, they've been huge. I think, I'm not sure that all the listeners, I think some would remember. I think a lot of people remember it differently. And I don't know how many people get to hear there was a lot of, how do I put it? You've alluded to it, like grumblings and rumblings about, the ITCC Rules Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee and the chair, which was you at the time, standing in the way of progress and not allowing. And I don't know how many people understand, like, how much thought and discussion and consideration, like, truly went into the whole process and trying to do the right thing. Like, maybe you could just try to explain, like, what it's like being in a leadership role, like in charge of the ITCC, and having something like the rope wrench, being conceived and introduced, and your arborist side, the innovative, the gearhead that most arborists are, certainly anyone involved in competition at whatever level it is, and being intrigued by it, but then also having to make a decision that's imparts the best wisdom and preserves the safety integrity of the event. Can you explain how you go through that, and maybe it can help people understand what it's like?
Being involved in the ITCC was the best times of my life. When I became chair, I made friends all the way through, all over the world. When I became chair and was faced with those decisions at that time in the industry, where social media was just getting big as well, it almost ranked at one of the worst times of my life. Because I went from making friends to making enemies. And like I said earlier, I like everybody along for the ride. I like the party. But I don't think people thought long term enough to see what we were doing. That, they just got too wrapped up in trying to defend a friend that had a really cool device. I think, if anything, we propelled advancement in the industry by being strict, by taking into consideration all those things. Because if we did not do what we did, that device nor the rope runner would be what it is today. And I'm not saying that we take credit for that. There's absolutely no credit taken there. That is Kevin Bingham's design 100%. But I think he needed that time and that period just as much as the industry needed that time and period of certain strictness, tighten the rules, make sure it's the right device, get insurance on it, get an engineered rating, get things done on it properly.
Well, one of the big holdbacks was a lack of instructions, was a lack of how to use it.
Lack of instructions, lack of testing, lack of all that stuff. But, it was also change, and change is to be feared and resisted. But so here we are as a group, and we're debriefing on this and looking at, we have some very, very influential people in the committee, not just from like a social media influencer these days, but people that had notoriety in the industry, that knew the products, knew the systems, knew the testing, understood the whole process, and they all contributed great points. And then to have to lead that and kind of make decisions along the way, regardless if you agree with or disagree with any of the decisions, as a leader, you had to just go with what the majority said. And and represent the committee as a whole. But in this case, I agreed with everything in the way it went, to the point where I wouldn't allow it in my business either. And I think it was a wonderful process for the industry as a whole. It just made people realize that it just takes time. Like, things don't have to be thrown out there. Look at how many products have been recalled because people have fallen or people have hurt themselves just because somebody needed to be cutting edge or needed to be the next cool thing, right? Like, take the time to understand the limitations of the device and take the time to understand how it works in your system. Unfortunately, I don't climb much anymore, so I'm not as in tune, but it still rings true when you have the responsibility of a leader in a business or a leader of the ITCC or anything that could influence the industry. Could be just one person on social media. Take the time to understand what you're talking about and make sure it's used in a safe manner.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean, that was a loaded question, and your question went quite long, so I forget the first part of it. But after about the third comma, I think I'm starting to catch on.
It was just the, if you to just take everyone back to that point in time and how, like, what the industry was like, what the concerns were. Like you mentioned, what were the deciding factors in saying, no, we're not going to allow the rope wrench at this time? Like, what were you trying to preserve and protect, and why? And do you remember?
Yeah, we were actually looking out for the greater good of the industry. And if we endorsed this product in the state that it was in, without instructions, without testing, without, our due diligence, we would say okay to the whole industry and, say this is good to go. And with how much the ITCC influenced how people climbed, we were scared that people would get hurt on it and people would actually fall. And there was just nothing there that was fit for purpose at the time. There was no insurance. He didn't have insurance. He didn't have, backing of a bigger company. And I didn't mean for this to go down and slag anything. If anything, I just really hope this boosts up anybody that wants to invent stuff to align themselves with somebody that's really good and grow it. There was opportunity there for people on the committee to steal an idea. And what the best part about it is nobody did. Right. And they went alongside him and said, how can we help you? That was the coolest part of it all.
So from the liability perspective, like you say, so one thing I'm hearing is that there was, like, if ITCC at the time were to endorse something, it almost gave it a tacit blessing or approval of fit for purpose and so on. And then it would kind of go like wildfire, and ultimately nobody wanted that responsibility and genuinely felt that there could be issues with it from a safety perspective. Was that the primary concern, or were there others?
No, that was the primary concern.
Okay.
Absolutely convicted. That was the primary concern.
And was, like, I remember there being discussions of the posterity of the event, even because if something, heaven forbid, the worst case were to occur, or multiple cases of fatalities regarding, then how does that end up reflect on the event as well? Or if something happens during the event on it as well. I think that was also part of it.
Well, yeah, then you're shutting down an event that is what brings everybody together. And, looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing. As painful as it was, sometimes I wouldn't change a thing because, as I mentioned before, the tighter the rules, the higher the performance. And I believe strongly in being fair and creating a safe environment in this. And, the ITCC too, like, it was at jeopardy if something were to happen. I mean, we know an accident happened at Tree Climbing Championships, which could have shut it all down. And, we ran a tight ship there. And I don't mean a tight ship like we were a bunch of tight asses and didn't let anything go, but it was well-run machine at that time. And unfortunately, some people don't like that. But I think if you were, or any of us were to talk to Kevin today, I think he'd be grateful too. what an amazing thing to have influenced the industry so much. Even today, like my kids are climbing on that. So here we sit, we can talk about what our foresight might have been, but as a parent, you're going to protect your child no matter what. You'll fight tooth and nail to the death for them. And I had no idea that my kids were going to be climbers, but they're climbing on those devices today.
Yep.
And I feel really good that it's gone through the ringer the way it has.
Right. And Tony, you were part of that process. I mean, you were certainly you've been a tech in the work climb for many years, and were there for the whole ride or experience we're talking about. What's your recollection and input on the process that took place over those years?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with Andrew. I think that, we, as people that, could make decisions on what could be used at competitions and what couldn't be used and what we would accept and what we wouldn't, was highly influential, because, I know early in my competition career, I'd see something in a Masters Challenge, and then that Monday I'm doing it, at work. That was one of the reasons you went when you were a young climber. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen, rope wrenches hooked up upside down because somebody saw it at a competition, and then, well, I got to get one of those, and they get one. And no, I think that was, I always sensed that was the driving force behind all of it, that we realized that the ITCC, while ultimately we were sitting there playing a game, what was permitted there became acceptable industry practice, whether we wanted it to or not. So I always appreciated the fact that Andrew and the people that were responsible for making the decisions, made those decisions the way they were and pushed it and held those standards, because it has to be, right? Because we're not just talking about painting the porch a different color. We're talking about people hang from these things, and, and it was good. And I agree. I think that, the device, the rope wrench as it became, and then the rope runner wouldn't be the same today if they hadn't have gone through that. And it could have been, and I think a lot of people lose the perspective, didn't have when you're a competitor and you get to ITCC, it's easy to get in a bubble and not see the bigger picture. But then, having volunteered for so long, I could see that bigger picture, and I always appreciated that. And I think that's where some people kind of got confused, is they didn't see the big picture. They saw somebody that they liked and admired being turned down for something they were passionate about and really wanted to do, but they didn't understand that, first and foremost, the turn down wasn't about the device. It was about the not showing up on time for a meeting. And the other part of it was that, what we permitted, what we did, there was, it was going to go, literally the Master Challenge could be on a Sunday, and those tools and techniques would be being used Monday morning. It's just the way it was. It's the way it is.
A lot of diamonds came out of that process, not just the rope runner being a diamond itself, or the rope wrench being a diamond itself, but even the people that were on the committee, the pressure that we were under, also gave us clarity and gave us, reasons. Like, I think all in all, the best outcome came because we, like, everybody as a whole went through it together under, perturbation.
Not only that, like, the question I asked was, when this all started, what pivotal changes have occurred and what times. And, I think absolutely, probably, if you were to pick one thing that has been most significant in changing the industry, the wrench is certainly part of it, if not the initial catalyst. Because you look at SRS, and like SRS is where it is today because of that device, and him even taking it as far as he did, and introducing it when he did, and ITCC putting the brakes on it and saying this needs to be fleshed out further, and for all the, like, it made SRS what it is today, which is, to me, the single biggest change that's occurred in the last 30 years. It's literally revolutionized. It's basically doubled the options that climbers have at their disposal for how to work or climb or enter a tree, right? Like, it's
that freaking brilliance.
Yeah. And the wrench was the impetus for that. Not just that, like, look at what, being reverse engineered into the chicane. Like, when you get, like, that's been said many times, when you get copy, you really got something, right? And let's face it, that's kind of what happened there, or is what happened there.
Yep.
And, I don't think we're done seeing the evolution of all of that yet. And I think back to Hubert and the founder and the guy that started ART, and he was always of the opinion that the industry will go to a device type system, a mechanical hitch of types, right? Which,
Yeah.
even the Zigzag is experiencing way more reception, I think, because of the wrench itself and all that process. And even, the,
Look at all the recalls it had.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, it
absolutely.
was just flushed out into the market because it was a big company and it didn't have the same, people didn't give it the same criticism at first because it was, like it was a big player
Yeah,
and it was a piece of shit. When it first came out, I mean, it had
yeah,
problems,
yeah,
but it too had to go through a recall and other things. But the difference is I don't know whether or not there's been many recalls on the other devices. So, but there's so much there about just relating it back to our industry and change. And
yeah,
I mean, we are constantly changing. We're constantly evolving in this industry. And I seen it today, just this past weekend, Mark Chisholm, I had dinner with him on Thursday night, and then Mark Godet, who works for us, both of them, doing a comparative debate at the Vertical Expo for Maple Leaf Ropes there,
yeah,
on MRS versus SRS, and people just loved it. I mean, there's limitations and benefits to both.
yeah.
Why is it that some of the best climbers in the world are still working on an MRS system in the Masters
Yep.
or in the work climb at the Internationals? Because it's smooth and it can be just as fast.
Yeah.
And you'll have your hard nose. Nope, this is faster, faster, faster. But I'll tell you what, I would not. I could be the fastest guy on SRS, and I would not want to go head to head with Mark Chisholm or, Bettis on a moving rope system. They probably just make you look just like new person.
Yep. Yep.
What a privilege to have been a part of all of that too. As much as it was hard, it was really a privilege. It was amazing, and it's amazing to have this forum to talk about that, because it really is true. A lot of people didn't know. A lot of people didn't know that our heart and soul was poured into it. We actually gave a shit. We cared, and we really wanted. We wanted it to be good, but it just wasn't ready.
Yeah, and there's brief points of times where people can listen or hear because they're at the right place at a conversation, at a trade show, or at a conference. But this was an opportunity to and I didn't know we were going to go here specifically at all. But now at least there's some record of it that people could go listen to the chair at the time talk about what you went through, which I think is valuable. It's like Don Blair said, and when we started this whole podcast, and he was one of our first guests, he said, this is an excellent thing you're doing, because when one of us old arborists dies and a library burns down,
Yeah.
and without capturing it somehow, and we're only getting glimpses in this podcast, and I don't know where it's all going to go, and so on, but in some way we're preserving some of those histories and those stories, and those that want to go find it can listen to it and hear it, and not it and listen rather than have to read it or find an article somewhere, which is good too. Don't get me wrong, but it always brings it back to this whole human forest thing. Like, if you think about a forest and the gradations in a forest and the different species within the forest and its evolution, like, I don't know what it's like when a forest fire goes through a human forest, but here we are, how I always ask people this question at some point in the interview, and it feels like a natural segue for me right now. Like, how do you feel being part of the human forest has impacted you? And we've been talking about competitions and trees and arboriculture, but how about you personally, in your personal life or your spiritual life or just in general? I realize it's sometimes difficult to disconnect someone that's been in the trees as long as you have, but do you feel that the trees or being part of trees has impacted you personally?
Oh man. The other day I met with a client and she was so grateful I haven't seen her in years. She's been a 20-year client, and I've passed her on to others that work here. And she was just so grateful for me to have made time to come out and see her. And I remember touching this butternut tree, walking by it, and you just put your hands on it. You get that sort of kinesthetic experience and memory of when you used to just grab that tree and climb it, and you could smell it, you can feel it. And it was a moment there where I was just like, man, I just love the fact that I could be in this industry, because I've learned so much from other people, from the trees themselves and how they function. We're one of the biggest brewers of compost tea in Canada, and you start to think about all the microbiology and the microcosms that are happening in the soils that make trees function. And most people are thinking about the tree and the flare and the leaves and what's above ground, and they forget about all this stuff underground and how rooted we are and everything. And together, we're all there's a bigger thing going on spiritually between us all. But all of that combined, just particularly learning about all the microbiology and the sustainability, like a tree is a sustainable organism in itself, a system so highly organized it repeats itself. And business is meant to be that way. We're meant to be that way. It's a complex thing, but I think for me personally, I look at people differently. I love connecting with people, and I think particularly in the last few years, like some of the experiences that we've had has been good in that aspect. But I also can now compartmentalize people out of, that don't really, I shouldn't say serve me. I don't really like that comment, but I can compartmentalize, people out that don't really contribute to a better me. I'm grateful for the purpose that trees have given me.
Interesting. I find myself, I think about it a lot because, these podcasts bring me back to it all the time. And, I was pondering, how trees, we're like trees, but not, like we can move and trees can't. But it struck me the other day, well, just yesterday or the day before, on a walk, a tree that's it sustained some storm damage, but the tree's a really cool tree, but it is what it is because of what it's gone through. And I think for me, it was like, we are who we are because of what we've gone through. And even those people that don't, or those experiences that are difficult or hard, trees don't have legs, so they can't run away from it, but they endure it, and it changes, and it makes them even more beautiful or different, or just who they are. And I think we're kind of like that too, even though we do have legs. We don't know.
We have legs, but we can't run away from it either.
No, we can't. Exactly.
You're rooted in your community.
Yeah, exactly.
And your roots are what hold you steadfast in that. If you choose to change careers and do something different, it doesn't ever take away from the fact that you were part of this community. Right. You may have just changed into something else, but we can't run from it. We are who we are because of the experiences we've had. I mean, if you were bullied, or you were, you're going to have some of those scars, and you're going to empathize with people in a different way. Yeah. If you were, very strategic, and you had lots of successes and lots of wins, and that you start to see how that works, and it's like you can encourage other people to do the same. I think where things digress is when people, and they see a lot of this in the arborist industry, is ego. That's where the accidents happen. That's where the things digress. And that's when people get out of the realm of the human forest.
Yep.
You separate yourself from others. And we all go through it. Right? It's an ebb and flow. We're in and out of ego all the time, and pride and other things. But it's definitely made me conscientious of it.
Well, I think we lose our focus of the forest, and we focus on individuals. And I remember Shigo always saying, Alex would always say that trees didn't come in singles. They're not meant to be singular organisms. They're part of a community called the forest. And we're part of that too. And when we get in our ego, we become singular focused, not
That's right.
focused on the community, right? And of course, we're all guilty of it, or at least I can certainly say I can speak for myself. But it's one of the reasons I like the term human force, because it reminds me that I'm not. It is a we program, right? It's not an I program. And
Yep.
life,
Yep.
when I say program here, I'm meaning life. And yeah, so
Yeah.
and then really it's the
One.
impetus of tree actions. How do people feel or think about that? Is kind of why I asked this question, just to get the different takes and perspective.
Well, I've always had. I found it funny that you're doing this. I think it's awesome. Not funny. I think it's awesome. Because I've always said it, right? Trees in the
Yeah,
people in the spiritual form are like trees in the physical form.
yeah,
We don't heal. We seal over old wounds, and those things are always with us. And your unconscious mind is so much more powerful than your conscious
right.
mind. People don't realize. But like, look at here now, like being in this industry for 30 years. If 30 years ago you told me I was going to have a 22-year-old, 23-year-old daughter that's competing in the different chapters and going to the internationals, and I'm going to have a son who's competing alongside, your son and others and some of the greats, and you're just kind of like, holy shit. Like, what an impact that is. Like, now it's even spreading further.
Yeah,
And I had to, I was taken back. I don't know if you remember, but we were teaching at Train the Trainer in Camp Caroline not that long ago, and I think it was like 50% of the class had university degrees in something different than arboriculture.
yeah,
And they tried it all out, and they changed their course and their focus, and they were like, oh man, I wish I found this sooner. But obviously they found it at the right time that was for them.
yeah.
And I came back from that program, and my son Bailey had come to our bedroom, and he's like, hey, I want to talk to you guys. And he's like third year university, right? He's like 95% average in statistics and mathematics, and like the equations he could solve are just ridiculous. And he just said, you know what? It's not what I love doing. I love climbing trees, and I don't think I want to be in university anymore for this. And I said, well, you should probably finish what you started. We'd always tell you to finish what you started. And he's like, yeah, but he's like, I'll give it a week or two and then we'll talk. And he was checked out. And, I watch him climb now, and I just look at how awesome it is. I watch Mackenzie climb now. I look how awesome it is. I just think, if that is what you like and that is your purpose, then go for it. But you think about how much we've influenced our kids in the industry along the way. It goes much beyond like our human forest, or our influence, our ripple, our whatever it might be, our connectivity to this industry goes way beyond, and it goes generations deep.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Tony, you're I mean, third generation. Is what your experience has been. Like, I don't know if I've ever asked you this or we talked about it, but like, did you see like your father was more than just a tree company owner? Like, he really genuinely liked tree work too, didn't he?
Yeah, my dad never owned a company. He always worked for others. But he really came from a forestry background when he got into arboriculture. I mean, honestly, he got into it probably just because that's where the jobs were. But he really ended up loving it, and was, very pivotal at certain points, in his career with people and meeting people, and was, became that, a kind of a fixture in the industry, if, locally, a little bit on the East Coast. And yeah, he just, he really did, he really did have the passion to love trees and nature. And he imparted that upon me and my brothers as well, that, by the time I was 18, I probably spent more time outside than I ever spent inside. It just, just what it was. We just didn't, we were always camping and hiking and doing stuff outside. And then, I have two older brothers, both of which have been and or are currently arborists. My oldest brother, Ben, runs a tree company. That's their 33 years in business now. And my brother in between us, I'm the youngest of three, Mark, has been an arborist off and on. My brother Mark's had a lot of jobs, but he has fallen into the field. So we've all ended up doing it in one way, shape, or form, and has passed that on. For my daughter, I think it pretty much stopped dead. I don't think she wants anything to do with trees, but that's all right. She'll find her own way in this world too. So it is interesting to see those things, move forward and to watch. I see Andrew's kids and I see your kids, Dwayne, and having known them for so long, and remember them being just toddlers at climbing competitions. And now I'm the old gray guy and betting and shit. But if they learn anything, at least they'll learn how to win more than I did. I could teach them how to lose. I'm not a good example, but I can be as a horrible warning. Like, don't be like that guy.
Well, I found it interesting in Mark Chisholm's podcast. He talks about that. He said, he always reminds people that he's lost more competitions than anybody, because he's one of the longest standing competitors, and he said, I have literally lost more times than I've won by far. Right. And he said, nobody's lost more events than I have. And I found that quite interesting. I've forgotten that we had that part of our conversation, and it's a really neat way of looking at it. It's true too, and what he was talking about at that point in time was how that, you can let experiences like that take you one way or another. Trees do what they do because they're nature's things. But the example is you adapt and overcome. And I think that's what you're talking about, Andrew, when you say the human form of people is like the trees, or the human soul is like the tree's natural form, and everything has an impact and changes and affects them, but it makes you who you are, and you can either choose to embrace that or you can choose to resist it. And that I think is the real sign of maturity, and what I like to think we learn that trees offer us freely if we're just open our eyes to see it.
Correct, and continue.
You can relate that back to, what you guys are talking about, that like, trees can't run from their problems and neither can we. It reminds me of one of my favorite Viktor Frankl quotes, which is, when you can no longer change the situation, you are forced to change yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lesson that, you can definitely learn from trees. And then, Andrew's comment that he once edited out that, I don't edit it out at all. There's, when you compartmentalize certain people in your life, that's nothing more than, I guess the terminology this day and now is setting boundaries, right? And trees are really, really good at setting boundaries. And I think as people, we need to get better at setting boundaries too. Yeah. There's a few truisms I have in my life, and one of them is you will become the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So choose those people wisely. And that's nothing more than a boundary, right? Trees do have to do the same thing. I think that we can learn to do that, and there's nothing wrong with setting those boundaries. Yeah, I was just up there a couple of weeks ago.
I know, but it was so short.
I like your analogy, Tony. You used that. I never heard it before. You talked about at Climariza about boundaries being like a fence, and there's a gate, but you could choose to open that gate or close it. But it's. I think wasn't that you were talking about boundaries am I mixing up an analogy?
Yeah, it's like a fence between you and your neighbor, right? And sometimes you open up the gate and you and your neighbor hang out and everything's great. Other times, you kind of close the gate and you have that separation there. That's fine. And then sometimes, the neighbor's kids who are a pain in your ass, the ball bounces over and you can choose to open the gate and start yelling and screaming, or you can just toss the ball back over and move on with your life. It's, that's what boundaries are for. There's always a choice, right? It's not that, I think, and you get real deep on this, right? If you set boundaries up that are so tight that nothing can ever get across, that's what we call isolation, and that leads to depression. Right. Boundaries are meant to be crossed. It's when it's crossed, what do you choose to do about it, right?
Right.
So with a boundary must come like some type of permission slip, right?
Yep.
Hall pass.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it. I mean, that can just stem into a whole other conversation in itself. But no, that's awesome. Awesome way to sum it.
I mean, like I said, the analogy really holds if you start to study trees and tree anatomies and how they form those chemical barriers. Like they're not 100%. And if they were 100%, trees wouldn't be what
That's
trees
right.
are, right?
And their cavities wouldn't become habitat and homes and allow other life forms to exist and be be habitat for them within themselves even their old
Yeah.
wounds become others' homes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about for you, Dwayne? Like, what's been for you like one of the biggest catalysts of
Catalyst.
doing? Well, let's say here, I'm pulling a you right now.
It's okay. It's okay.
You become like those we hang out with. Um, what would you say was your biggest influence of getting into arboriculture? What was the turning point for you?
I think it was, inadvertently, first of all, that was my experience at university when I decided to go to university. And I was got a job on the grounds crew, and I got put out the tree nursery. So that I didn't know a thing about trees at that point, and it was just a summer job, and it was off campus. So I was a captive audience to a couple tree nerd old nursery guys that loved trees and were all about trees, and as only nursery people can be. And as that know nursery people, they can be pretty intense, right? Like they only talked Latin about trees in Latin form. They didn't use common names, and so I had no idea that was gonna, but that inadvertently. And then when I went to college a couple years later, and again it was, I have to say divine providence if I look back on it. To me, it was just weird set of circumstances, but I think there was a lot more going on than I was aware of at the time. But when I got to school and I suddenly realized how that work experience totally made a huge difference in, like, I was in an advantaged state going to my first year landscape horticulture school. And I was like, I had no idea that this work experience, and two things, it made it fun and it made school fun. And school had always been fun, but only because of sports and socialization. I never liked school work per se. But this made school fun, and it gave me a sense of pride and belonging because I got good marks. And so suddenly I'm the
Mm-hmm.
top of the class. I look smart, and I was really enjoying it. So that was 1988, and I never have looked back. Like, I've never left the industry. So it was just, and then the next pivotal part was finding teaching, and being asked as I graduated because I had good marks, so it tied back. Hey, you be good to teach this ID class off campus we're running, and a pre-apprenticeship program, and it was great. It was winter work, and that was the first time I made the correlation that I really like to teach, and that was it. And I think subsequently to that, I've realized really what I like to do is teach, but it just so happens to be that my second passion is trees, and I like to teach. So teaching about trees is just the double whammy, and I would feel very gifted and fortunate to have found that somehow. And I don't really think I found it. I think it was gifted to me.
Do you think there's other industries where people stay in it for 30, 35 years or got into second, third generations that have the same passion or connectivity as the arborist industry?
I do. I do.
Yeah.
I do think there is. Yeah, I think people find. I think cabinet makers. I think people that do fine woodwork.
Yeah.
I think brick,
Yeah.
masonry.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
any of the
Yeah.
trades.
I could see.
Any of the trades. Really, even plumbers. I think have. Like, I don't mean to minimize plumbing, but I mean it's a shitty job, right? So I mean that punnily.
But now, like, there's even an art to it all
Absolutely.
on flow and where it goes and how it all works. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not just, you're not just plugging pipes together. There's a
No.
lot to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you.
It gets hidden behind the walls.
Yeah. And
Their work gets hidden behind the walls.
yeah, it's not seen as much. Yeah. I think for people that have found what they really like to do, and not just that, it's not enough that you really like what you do, but it has to also sustain you, not just spiritually, emotionally, but financially too. Like, you can really love something, but if you can't make a living at it, it's not going to be fun for long, and you'll lose that fun, right? Like it needs to have a criteria, an element of it has to be able to sustain you in all ways.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we need to eat, and I don't know if that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And in today's market, today, the way it is, you have to be able to, afford a dwelling and food, or you can't
Yeah.
really go on, right?
Well, the other thing with our industry, I mean, we were not like top of the trade, red sealed. We were trades. We were not red sealed. Have the most dangerous job, but definitely our pay didn't always reflect that. And I see that slowly changing, but it's still tough to keep up. Like even with what our value is as a business to the consumer,
Yeah.
it's still people out there doing it for free, but not really realizing what the cost of running a business is, let alone what the risks involved are and why we should. I've people always ask me too in business, like, what's the biggest lesson you could give somebody new in business? And I just be like, you know what, keep your prices high, keep your price. And it has not to do with selfishness, but if you listen till the end of this, you'll understand why, because you see a crew lead, it's people on the ground, they start as a groundsman or apprentice climber or whatever. How do they make more money? They create more value. They get faster at their job. They get better at their job. They get more efficient. They critically think, and they continually do safe work. And their objective is to please you, right? And when they please you, then you give them a raise. And when it just sort of happens that way, like for lack of better words. And if your pricing is constantly down, your equipment is down, your morale is down, and your people are working much harder than they should be to get jobs done, and you sort of create this non-sustainable environment. But if you keep your prices up and you charge accordingly, I'm not saying like making 222% on every job, like Moderna or Pfizer or anything like that, but literally making good, profitable, where the crews can go in and do nice work together and safe work together and use good arboricultural practices. You have to charge for that, and it's going to create a safer environment for the staff, for the team. Morale is going to be up because you can buy nicer equipment. It's all part of the system that's important to remember. And it's not about greed. It's about getting people to a place they deserve. I remember you told me this once, like it was like 20 years ago or so, maybe even more. I think we were coming back from the first training site in Mississauga, and you're like, imagine being like the best sports team where you could hire the best of the best. And, you were known for the fact that you ran a tree service that paid the highest. And it's a difficult thing to do. You grow to 20, you grow to 25, or you're 15, whatever. The more you grow, the harder it is to do. If you're a 3-person operation, it's easier to pay somebody a larger sum of money every day than it is if you're with a larger running company, because of efficiencies and deficiencies, things we learn along the way. But that's one thing. If company owners and salespeople could realize that if they could keep their prices good and keep their prices up, they can create a safer environment because people aren't so pressured to work harder, faster, and get things done in a less safe manner.
That's an interesting comment you make, and I appreciate it. It's funny because Tony often asks our guests what if they could do anything different, or if they were a young climber starting out, what would they do? And you kind of answered it from a young arborist entrepreneur perspective. If you were starting a tree business, what you just said is kind of pretty good advice, isn't it?
I would say it is really, if you really think about it, if early years, and if I'd have taken yours and Norm's advice years and years ago too, of charging for every quote, imagine where it'd be now. It would have hurt for the first 3 years then, but this free quote shit's got to go, man. Like, why am I going out competing against 7 companies to tell you something on what you should do with your trees, and so you can go with the lowest price? It doesn't make any sense to me. But the unfortunate part is that's the world we live in, and it's a difficult thing to change when you have the responsibilities to feed the mouths that you have to feed. Yeah. It's a scary road, but one thing we've been doing is just testing it in different areas.
Well, Tony, do you have any sagely questions? And we're drawing near to a natural segue for our podcast. But is there any? Andrew kind of answered a question that you often ask in a little different way. So you got something different for him?
Sorry, sorry, Tony.
No, it's good.
No. You answered my question before I could ask it, so that's good. You one to Andrew. Tony, nothing.
As for climbers, like if you're new in the industry, the only thing I could say there would be to take a step back from your ego and surround yourself with great people. Like Tony said earlier, you want to be like people, then surround yourself with those people. Yeah. What an amazing I had no idea where this podcast was going to go or what was going to happen, because I mean, we all know each other so well, and you have sort of ideas, but I just came in very open-minded and not attached to anything either, because it's there's so much to this industry. We could probably be talking for hours and hours yet on all different.
On that note, we reserve the right to for sequels and re-interviews.
Yeah. I'm not too worried about not seeing you guys again.
No.